It's probably the most recognised river in the world, Paris's Seine. In today's show, we're going to unveil some of the secrets of this famous river. I'm joined in the studio by the best-selling author and former Paris bureau chief of the New York Times, Elaine Sciolino. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now, Elaine's new book is The Seine, the river that made Paris. Now, it begins in the spring of 1978. I was seduced by a river. As a young journalist in Paris, one of the earliest chapters calls it the most romantic river in the world, and also one of Paris's main streets. What made you fall in love with the Seine?
I came to Paris as a very young foreign correspondent, very green, no friends, no lovers, no sources, nothing except a desire to do my job and make a life for myself here. And every day I would walk across the river home from the office at Newsweek magazine, and I'd stop in the middle of my bridge, and I'd look out and watch the sunset behind the Eiffel Tower, and I'd say, it's going to be okay. And it was over time.
And when we think of the Seine, we immediately think of Paris. But of course, it's much larger than that. To write the book, you travelled all the way to the source in Burgundy, and then where the river meets the sea at Le Havre. Tell us about one of your favourite people or favourite places that you came across on your journey.
Well, my favorite place is the source of the Seine, which, believe it or not, belongs to the city of Paris, because Napoleon III, as emperor, decided he loved the Seine so much that he wanted to claim the source as part of Paris. And it was a healing temple there, a Gallo-Roman healing temple dedicated to a goddess. And it just seduced me.
And I mean, I've learned so much reading the book. Its role in D-Day, so many different facts. What was the most surprising thing that you discovered in writing the book?
That the Seine is not one river. It's many rivers with a lot of different identities. When it starts, it's just tiny little bubbling up sources from the ground. And when it ends all the way in Le Havre, it's a huge, wide estuary that opens to the sea.
Can you tell us about the time you swam in the River Seine?
Oh, that was fun. I was visiting a champagne domaine. Maybe some of your viewers don't know that champagne touches the Seine. You know, we think of Champagne as the northern domaine and the fancy ones, but there's also this great area in the south, and one of the domains touches the Seine. And the water around there is so pure. This is near the town of Troyes, that, yes, I went swimming in the Seine.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it's pure in some places. You look back at
cold. It's cold. It's pure, but it's very cold.
You look back at hundreds of years of history and the Seine's role in that history. But tell us how the river helped Notre-Dame last year during the night of the Great Fire.
My book was already written. It was already in print, and it had been given out to reviewers and fact checkers when the fire broke out at Notre-Dame. And I realized there was a Seine connection, because the Ile de la Cité did not have enough volume of water or enough water pressure to put out the fire. The firefighters needed to find another source. And what they did in this very dramatic act that night was to call a boat all the way from the Marne River to the Seine, through the curves in the Seine, through a lock, to anchor in front of the Seine and start pumping water up to the fire. And in the end, about half the water used in the operation to put out the fire came from the Seine.
Wow, incredible. And in recent years, there's been this push to reinvent the Seine, hasn't there? You even tried to get a statue of an ancient river goddess who influenced the name of the Seine, Sequana, commissioned. Many of the banks of the river have also become pedestrianised. You can now dance on the Seine, eat on the Seine. There are museums on the river. And there's a reasonably new cultural centre on the river that opened in 2017 called La Seine Musicale. Why is this? Tell us about this push to reinvent the Seine.
Rivers anywhere are magical, and they're sources of inspiration. They're places of recreation. But in Paris, I mean, it is the most romantic river in the world, and it's an attraction in and of itself. And so why not use it to your advantage? And the current mayor is trying to clean up the Seine enough so that we can all go swimming in the Seine by the time the Summer Olympics come in 2024. And yes, there is a Gallo-Roman goddess, Sequana, who inspired the Seine and made it a holy river. And I think we should build a statue to her, and we can have Sequana cufflinks and earrings and coffee mugs, and make her the female icon of of France, replace Marianne, perhaps.
Well, the Seine is obviously a very well-known site here in Paris, and it might be one of the most visited cities in the world, but there are still some hidden treasures here. We're going to talk now about a place in Montmartre. You wrote a book about a street not far from here, the only street in Paris, life on the Rue de Martyrs. That's not far from here. Now, we're going to talk about the former home of musician and writer Boris Vian. He's been dead for 60 years, but he still has legions of fans, and on Saturdays, many of them line up in the cold for a unique glimpse of how he lived. James Wilson reports.
He was known for so many of his talents. Boris Vian was a gifted singer, musician and writer. Vian's anti-militarist views scandalised France in the 1950s, but has enchanted subsequent generations. He passed away in 1959, but his spirit can still be found in the place he called home, Paris's Montmartre. And every Saturday, fans of the author and his works gather to see where he lived.
He's a poet from my youth.
But before they visit, they have to apply, and the flat receives dozens of letters a week.
The idea that I might have the chance to visit your apartment delights me. Please accept me. Now that's an extraordinary letter.
All these fans of Boris Vian have the same dream, to discover just a little about how their idol lived. And the lucky visitors are allowed to explore his home in intimate detail.
You can visit all the rooms. There's the kitchen and a cellar.
And the kitchen has remained pretty much the same for the past 60 years. The same goes for the rest of the property. You can see his typewriter as if he's just left it to go for a walk. And his record collection, comprised of over 3,000 albums, is intact. Even his guitar is still there.
The atmosphere is very 50s, but it still has incredible modernity. His life touched so many generations.
Today, Boris Vian may no longer be with us, but for those who crave a different tourist experience in Paris, have a desire to discover how he lived, there's a small flat tucked away in Montmartre that allows you to do just that.
There are so many various things. I know you've been to his house before in the past, and you've been here for quite a long time in Paris. You were the Paris bureau chief for the New York Times. You've written books on Paris and the French, including La Seduction, how the French play the game of life, and the only street in Paris, life on the Rue de Martyrs. So no better person really to talk about what we should be doing in Paris this year. Tell us about something worth seeing culturally in 2020.
Well, Iran's been in the news, and there was a brief moment where it seemed as if the American president, Donald Trump, was going to threaten Iranian cultural sites. So what better thing to do than to go to the Louvre and visit the Persian Collection? Not the Islamic wing, which is wonderful, but this hidden away collection that makes you feel as if you are in ancient Iran. And it doesn't exist in Iran. It exists in Paris.
It's no surprise, really, that this Persian collection interests you, Elaine, because as a writer, you've already written a book, Persia Mirrors, The Elusive Face of Iran. As a journalist, you've covered Iran extensively as a correspondent for Newsweek and the New York Times. You were there for the Iranian Revolution, the hostage crisis, the Iran-Iraq war, amongst many other things. I actually went to Iran in 2016 to do a show visiting cultural sites, meeting Iranian artists, talking about how Iran was opening up to the world. But is it even possible now to go to Iran and visit cultural sites like that?
It's possible, and I would urge your viewers, especially those that don't have American passports, to go now. Maybe not this second, but let's wait a few weeks until things calm down, because they will calm down. Iran is a country of improvisation and unpredictable repression, and it is a destination for tourists. But in the meantime, go to the Louvre and go look at these extraordinary artifacts and bits and pieces of the capital that was created by Darius the Great more than 2,500 years ago in a place called Susa. And it's kind of the same era as Persepolis, which we know much more about. But you can get lost in ancient Persia and for a moment feel that you are communing with Iran.
Okay, I'm just going to tip you up for one more cultural tip.
Please.
We always end our show with our guest cultural pick of the moment. What's yours?
Oh, the Leonardo exhibit. It's 160 artifacts and that are either created by Leonardo or about Leonardo. There are some wonderful hidden treasures. Yes, the paintings of Leonardo, but also paintings by the school of Leonardo. And I looked at some of these paintings and I thought, my gosh, these are as good as the Mona Lisa. So again, another place of discovery. But a lot of people, a lot of long lines. So after you go and get through Leonardo, go visit the Persian Collection.
Okay, Elaine, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
joining us. Now, the Louvre's exhibition Leonardo da Vinci is on until the 24th of February. We're going to leave you with that, and you can watch the show Encore did on Leonardo da Vinci for the 500th anniversary of his death on our website. Elaine's new book is The Seine, the River That Made Paris. It's available now. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.